Your chainsaw is cutting slow. You know it. You can feel it. It used to drop through a 12-inch oak like it was nothing. Now it labors. Now it pushes instead of pulls. Now you are leaning into it and the saw is still moving slower than it should. So you go to the dealer, you buy a new chain, you put it on, and for about 2 hours everything feels right again. And then it slows down again. And you buy another chain. And it happens again. I need to tell you something nobody at the parts counter is going to tell you because the parts counter makes money every time you buy a new chain. The chain is almost never the real problem. The chain is the symptom. The real problem is somewhere else. And until you fix the real problem, you can put brand new chains on that saw every week and it will still cut slow. Today I am going to show you the 3 actual reasons chainsaws cut slow, how to diagnose which one you have, and how to fix each one permanently. After this video, you are going to stop buying chains you do not need and start fixing the problem you actually have. I am Saw Honest. Do not buy blind. Before I get into the 3 causes, understand this. A chainsaw cuts fast when 3 things work together: sharp cutting edges, correct bite depth per tooth, and mechanical power delivered through the sprocket. When speed drops, one of those 3 has failed. A new chain only addresses the first one, and only temporarily. If your old chain went dull in 2 hours, your new one will too, for exactly the same reason. Let us go through the 3 real causes one by one. The first cause is incorrect filing angle on the chain. This is responsible for more slow-cutting chainsaws in America than any other single factor. And it is almost entirely the result of people sharpening their chains incorrectly, or taking them to a shop that uses a mechanical grinder set to the wrong angle. Every chainsaw chain has 2 critical angles on each cutting tooth. The top plate angle, which is the angle of the cutting face you see when you look at the tooth from above, and the side plate angle, which is the angle of the face that contacts the wood first. On a standard crosscut chain, the correct top plate angle is 30 degrees. When this angle is wrong, even by 5 degrees, the tooth stops shearing and starts scraping. A scraping tooth requires dramatically more force, generates more heat, dulls faster, and produces dust instead of chips. Here's how you know if this is your problem. Pull the chain off the saw and look at the cutting teeth. Each tooth should have a sharp, clearly defined corner where the top plate and side plate meet. That corner is the actual cutting edge. If the corner is rounded, the angles are gone. If the top of the tooth looks shiny and flat instead of angular, someone filed it flat. If the teeth all look the same length and shape when you are looking along the chain, the angles are probably consistent. If they vary, the filing has been inconsistent, and some teeth are working harder than others. The fix is to learn to file correctly, or find a shop with a precision chain grinder that is properly calibrated. A correctly filed chain feels completely different the moment the bar touches wood. It almost pulls itself through the cut. If sharpening your chain does not produce that feeling, the angles are still wrong. The second cause is worn or incorrect depth gauges. Depth gauges are the small rounded rakers that sit in front of each cutting tooth. Their job is to control how deep each tooth bites into the wood. The correct depth gauge height is the distance the gauge sits below the cutting tooth above it. That distance is measured in thousandths of an inch, and it is specific to the chain type and the wood species you are cutting. For most standard crosscut chains in softwood, the correct depth gauge drop is between 25 and 30 thousandths of an inch. In hardwood, you typically want slightly less, around 20 to 25 thousandths. When depth gauges are too high, meaning they have not been lowered as the chain has been sharpened and the teeth have gotten shorter, the gauges ride on the wood surface before the teeth can bite. The chain skims across the top instead of cutting into it. You feel this as a dramatic loss of cutting aggression, even on a freshly sharpened chain. Every time you sharpen your chain, the cutting teeth get slightly shorter. If you do not also lower the depth gauges to maintain the correct drop, after 3 or 4 sharpenings the gauges are too high, and the chain has effectively stopped cutting aggressively, regardless of how sharp the teeth are. This is the #1 reason why a freshly sharpened chain still cuts slowly. The teeth are sharp. The depth gauges are too tall. The chain cannot bite. The fix is a depth gauge tool and a flat file. The depth gauge tool has a slot that sits on the chain and shows you exactly how much material to remove from the gauge to restore the correct height. This is a $5 tool that every chainsaw owner should have in their kit. Use it every 3rd sharpening on softwood, every 2nd sharpening on hardwood. The third cause is a worn drive sprocket. This is the most expensive of the 3 to fix and the most commonly ignored. And ignoring it costs you far more in chains than the sprocket replacement would have. The drive sprocket is the star-shaped gear the chain loops around at the engine end of the bar. The sprocket is made of softer steel than the chain drive links. Under normal use, it wears faster than the chain. A sprocket that is visibly worn has teeth with a hooked or concave profile instead of the original rounded profile. When you run a chain on a worn sprocket, the chain does not seat correctly in the sprocket teeth. It hops slightly on each revolution. That hopping causes vibration, accelerated chain stretch, and dramatically reduced cutting efficiency because the chain is not moving at a consistent speed through the cut. The rule of thumb that professional mechanics use is to replace the sprocket every 2 to 3 chains. Most homeowners have never replaced the sprocket in the life of their saw. They have run 5 or 6 chains on the same sprocket and wondered why each new chain seems to go dull faster than the last. A worn sprocket destroys new chains. A new chain on a worn sprocket will wear to the profile of the sprocket within the first few hours, and then continue to wear faster than normal for its entire remaining life. You are throwing money at the symptom while the cause keeps getting worse. Sprocket replacement on most chainsaws requires a clutch removal tool specific to the brand. The sprocket itself costs between $8 and $20 depending on the model. The job takes about 20 minutes with the right tool. This is absolutely something a handy person can do at home, and there are model-specific tutorials available for every major chainsaw brand. Here is the diagnostic order. Start with the depth gauges. Check them with a gauge tool and file down if high. If speed returns, that was your problem. If not, sharpen with careful attention to filing angles. If the saw still cuts slowly with correct gauges and sharp angles, put on a new chain. If that new chain wears fast, the sprocket is worn. Replace the sprocket and the problem is solved permanently. One last thing before you go. The next time you are in front of the parts counter reaching for a new chain, ask yourself which of those 3 problems you have actually diagnosed. Sharp angles, correct depth gauges, good sprocket. If you cannot answer that question, put the chain back and go home to check. You are probably about to spend $20 on something that will not fix what is broken. I am saw honest. Do not buy blind.